In order to make choices that are best for you, please note that this episode does contain brief mentions of sexual assault. A quick note before we begin. While Kelsey and Amanda enjoy debating for your entertainment, we want our listeners to know that Lit Vibes Only is an inclusive community that honors all tastes and respects all readers. Enjoy this episode.
Welcome to Lit Vibes Only, where we lit the shit out of books we love and hate. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Amanda. And we are so glad to have you back with us once again for our first December Lit It or Quit It episode, where we're going to dive deep into A Court of Thorns and Roses.
I am shitting my pants over here. I'm so excited for this episode.
I'm glad to be here. We'll just leave it at that. But before we get to that, we, of course, want to remind you or let you know for the first time, if this is your first episode, where you can find us on socials. So we are on Instagram at litvibesonly_podcast. We're on TikTok at litvibesonlypodcast and also on YouTube at Lit Vibes Only Podcast. So be sure to check us out on those platforms. We post lots of fun, extra bookish content, and it also provides you a way to like engage with us and let us know what you think about what we're chatting about on our podcast.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can do to let us know what you're thinking about the podcast is to rate and review us. So we are officially in the home stretch of our sticker giveaway. It ends on Friday, December 13th. And
spooky.
If you want to get your hands on a sticker before they are gone forever, what you'll need to do is you'll need to go wherever you listen to your podcast, one of the major platforms. We're on there. You're going to rate us, and then you're going to write a positive review. If you're on Spotify, just write a comment on one of the episodes since you can't review the entire podcast for whatever reason. Take a screenshot of that comment or that review and then send it to us on TikTok or Instagram, or you can also email it to us at litvibesonlypodcast@gmail.com. And make sure to include your address and we'll get that to you. And also tell us where you stick it and like take a photo and tag us on socials. And yeah, we want to see where all of these stickers are ending up.
At first, I had no idea what you were talking about. Stick it. I was like, what? That's why
But you're gonna stick it.
Sorry.
Yes. So yeah.
Okay. Now to the really important news here.
Tell us more.
Oh, wait, but I think you were going to tell us about your cozy set and also send me the link because I want it.
So I'm currently wearing this like really comfy loungewear set from Aerie that I just purchased. It's like heather gray. It is the softest thing I've ever worn. It feels like you're just wrapped in a hug. And I am someone who's always cold. I literally have a sweatshirt that reads always cold. So to have something that's really soft and also
sweater.
keeps me warm is like a must in the winter. So yeah, I'll send you the link for it. And it's also like, I think it's like nice enough where I could like wear this on a flight or like to the grocery store and like no one would bat an eye.
Oh, especially in Seattle.
I mean, I have had multiple conversations about this with people who are like from the East Coast or just like are not from the PNW, specifically Seattle. And I remember showing up here and being like, oh, fashion doesn't exist in Seattle. It's just
so
not a
weird.
thing.
It is really weird. Like people just go out in sweats all the time.
Or they're just like permanently in like hiking gear. Like everyone here is always ready to just like hike at like the drop of a hat. Like we're just gonna break out into spontaneous hiking. Even at work, it's
too.
crazy.
Yeah,
like everyone is always in like their like hiking boots and their like pants with it's a thing.
We went on a hike this weekend and I actually saw quite a few people who were not dressed for a hike. Like it was weird. Like I saw two women and they were like out there with their Starbucks cups.
Oh God.
And one of the women had white sweats on. They were rolled up a little bit
Yeah.
and white sneakers. And I was like, what is going on?
What is
Like, you are
happening?
not prepared for this at all. You just decided like randomly to come out here. I don't understand.
I've seen that too. I went on a hike over the summer with a friend and we were talking about like pet peeves when it comes to hiking. And I was like, I see so many people out here. And some folks like, well, literally, I've seen this multiple times. Instead of having like a backpack with like their water and gear and whatever in it, they'll literally just be holding like a plastic shopping bag. And I'm like, you're just gonna hike
Oh,
with
interesting.
that all the way up the hill? Or they'll have like casual like sneakers on, like not athletic sneakers, just like sneakers you wear to look cute.
Oh, I've seen
And I'm like,
Converse
oh
too.
yeah.
Like, not
Yeah,
good.
or like I've seen
Slipping everywhere.
flip-flops. I know. I'm like, y'all, what who did like and maybe they really did. They were just like out and about and they were like, "Hey, let's
Yeah.
go for a hike."
Actually, let's just go up there.
Yeah.
The one bringing up pet peeves.
Yeah.
I hate it when people are playing music. That
Oh
is
my gosh, that
so
is my number
annoying.
one. Number one. Like I'm like,
What
we're
is
out
that
here to
about?
I don't know. And I'm like, the Lord provided us with AirPods. Let us use them.
Oh my goodness.
I
Don't
don't
say
get it.
that.
I'm like, we have so many ways to listen to music, like
Yeah.
individually. Why are
Yeah.
you blaring your Bluetooth
Uh-huh.
speaker?
The other thing that I find really annoying is when like a group of people are like super obnoxiously loud and
Yep.
you're like, I'm out here for the peace, dude.
Yep.
And you're just screaming out here. I don't
Yeah.
understand. I shouldn't be able
It's
to hear you from
yep,
like a ways away. If I
exactly.
can't see you, I shouldn't hear you.
Mm-hmm. It's just really inconsiderate. Like
I
there
think
are
so too.
places to do that, to be like loud and
Totally.
rambunctious. I'm just like, hiking isn't the place. Like,
Mm,
I don't know. Maybe I'm just a cranky old lady.
maybe
But
we are. We're
we're
becoming
just like
cranky
two
old ladies.
crotchety old ladies. We just get on this podcast and complain. Oh my gosh. But I want to hear about, for those of you who are like watching this on either like Spotify or like on YouTube, if you
YouTube.
look to like what the right, the left of Kelsey,
To
you'll
me, it's
see,
my left,
to me,
but
it's my right.
yeah, okay.
There's a sad little plant behind you. What
I
happened?
know. I was telling you about it earlier. I was like, what the I was like, this poor little plant. So, weird story. We went to the Eras tour, remember? And we had to get a cat sitter. We have two cats. And so we always have to get a pet sitter. And this was a new pet sitter. And she seemed fine. Like she seemed like kind enough and everything. And we just can't figure out how else this could have happened. It had to have been her, where we woke up the day after we got back,
Mhm.
and this thermostat and the one in the living room
Mhm.
was on almost 90 degrees. Wasn't like that when we got there. So it had to have been like programmed to like
Yeah, to go up.
go up
That's
at a
insane.
certain time. And so Cesadio, he's really sensitive to heat. And so he was
Yeah.
like pissed. And I was like, I
Yeah.
don't know what else it could have been. And like, we don't know
Yeah.
why someone would do that.
Unless your house is haunted.
It was really strange. And so from the heat, this plant
Oh
died. Like the leaves
no.
just fell off. So we don't know what to do with it. Like, do you replant
Oh
it?
no.
What do you do?
I don't like, is it permanent? I do not have
I
a
don't
green
know.
thumb, so I have no idea, but I wonder if it's like permanent, or if you just like give it time, it'll
Maybe.
regenerate
Or
its
maybe it just needs
leaves.
to be put in water. I'm not sure. Propagated or something.
Also, if she did set the thermostat, like why 90? Like that is insanely hot.
Super, super hot. And it
Yeah.
wasn't even cold like back then.
Yeah.
It's not like it was snowing or something.
Yeah. Even if it was,
So
90 is insane. And I'm
yeah,
someone who's cold, so that's
yeah.
crazy.
No,
I'm
it was
sorry.
bad. So that was really strange. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I admire the fact that you have plants, like real ones that can grow.
Yeah,
All of
these
mine are
plants over here.
fake.
This
I
one
know, I
looks
can
a
see
little
that.
sad too. They're
Yeah,
real. They're real.
I've never been able to keep anything alive, even like the most basic plants. So I've just given up and I've got my fake ones, and that's my little spot of green.
Oh, you got fake ones.
Yes.
Do you
But
dust them frequently?
I've never dusted them.
Or you
Like,
might want to check into it.
I don't think they need it. I'm looking at some of them right now. I don't know. Well, I'll think about it. But yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your plant. I hope it comes back to
Yeah,
life.
me
But in
too.
speaking of like cold weather and winter, because this will be in December, yeah, when this drops.
Mhm.
I always feel like I need especially because, you know, I have hyperactive ADHD and I like to stay busy and like I get cabin fever easily when I'm like trapped inside for
Oh,
days at a
sure.
time. So I always need like outlets. And so I do like these paint by numbers
Oh,
paintings that are like, they're for adults. So they're not like really simplistic,
no.
like children's
Yeah, no, I
paintings.
know.
They're like age appropriate and they're
Oh,
actually quite stunning. I did one last winter. And so I have one that I just started
oh,
for like
nice.
this winter
The
season.
winter season.
And it's just like such a nice, because I love painting, but I suck at it. And so this way I can paint and end up with a pretty
Within the
out.
lines.
Yes, I can paint within the lines and I
Specific
end up with
lines.
like something I want to hang on my wall. But it's great. Highly recommend for folks who are like me and either need a creative outlet or just like need something fun to do over the long rainy
Cool.
winter months. I feel like I should link both like this loungewear set
Yeah.
and like the,
Paid by
the
numbers.
Yeah,
We
maybe I'll
should
put
have
it on
reached
our
out for them for Hey,
Please
sponsor us
sponsor us.
actually.
Yes. But yeah, maybe on our socials, I'll drop the links for these when this episode drops. But
Yeah.
we've got important things to do right now.
Yes. Is everyone ready?
It's like we need a drum roll.
Dun,
I'll have to find a sound effect.
I am the sound effect. What are you talking about?
I'm sorry. That was excellent.
No one's
I
gonna
talked right over
be
it.
able to tell that was not a sound effect. It was
true.
so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here we are, our ACOTAR episode. I've been waiting for this for 4 months, y'all. I'm so excited. And the fact
Also
that
mentioned it in like multiple episodes leading up to this point.
I really cannot wait to hear Amanda's opinion. And then also, if it's negative, just to be like, you're wrong. Sorry.
You don't need to apologize.
But that's wrong. So the reason why I chose this book, so if those of you who have never read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, this book is very famous and very well known in the fantasy and romantasy community. And so that was one of the reasons why I chose it, because it's so well known and there's a huge fandom for these books. And I needed Amanda's thoughts and to hear her experience of it. And
you might regret saying that.
it was one of the books that got me back into reading as an adult. And so it's one of my favorite series. And so we had to read it.
Of course. But of course.
Okay, so quick response, lit it or quit it, Amanda?
Yeah, so I actually am gonna have 2 responses for this.
It's short response.
I know, but it'll be quick, I promise. So as a fantasy novel, like this would be a quit it for me.
Interesting.
As a fairy tale, I would be like, oh, this is like a lit-ish for me. So that's what I'll say.
Okay. Moving on, please do our summary.
So,
and if you get anything incorrect, I will correct you.
Thank you, because that will probably happen. But before we do that, because I did not listen to this on audiobook and because I did not go and listen to like a bunch of commentary on this book beforehand, I need some clarity around how to pronounce these names. Well, I didn't want to because like I wanted my thoughts to be my own before like getting a bunch of feedback from other people. So like you're getting like the unfiltered Amanda response to this book. And then we can like talk about other people's input when we get to our literally the words. Okay.
Let's hear it.
So how do you pronounce? So I already texted you to figure out how to pronounce. So it's Feyre.
Yes,
right?
Feyre.
Okay. And then
what did you think it was?
I don't fire for fairy. I don't know. Like so Feyre. And then how do you pronounce you were saying earlier it's Rhysand? Oh my gosh. Rhysand. But hold on, it's shortened in the book. So it's just Rhys. Oh, it is Rhys. Okay.
Rhys.
So Rhys is Rhysand. Okay. And then is it Lucian? Okay. So Rhysand. So the emphasis on the second syllable. Okay. Lucian and Feyre. And then Tamlin, which was easy.
Tam.
There's Nesta. There's Amarantha. And I think those are the main ones. Yeah,
they are. Yeah.
Okay,
but her other sister, Elaine.
Yeah, that
Nesta,
one was
Elaine.
Yeah, that one I could
Papa
pronounce.
Archeron.
Sure, Papa Archeron. And then like some randos that were in there as well, like Jurian. I think that's how you
Wait,
say
don't
that.
forget Claire.
No, I have literally
Claire better.
there's a note in my notes that just says Claire, all capitals with 2 exclamation marks. And we'll get to that later. All right,
Yes.
so this story. So for those of you who haven't read ACOTAR, I'm going to attempt to
Yes.
summarize this book for
Summarize
you so
this
you
book.
can enjoy this Lit or Quit It episode. So this story takes place in Prithian, which is a fantastical land, which was also in a map at the beginning of this book.
Yes.
Which honestly, you know how I feel about maps in fantasy books. I appreciated that it was just the one map and it was fairly easy to process all of the information, so it was fine. So it takes place in Prithian. In this fantasy world, there are fairies and there are humans. And historically, the fairies, because they are more powerful, have like subjugated humans and they were essentially like enslaved to fairies and were often mistreated. Because of that, there was like a huge uprising and the humans and the fairies like got into it. And ultimately, I don't know that I would say the humans won, but they basically reached a decision where like humans were going to occupy some parts of Prithian and the fairies were going to occupy the other parts. And within the fairy world, there are different types of fairies, and there are also there's fairy nobility, which is the high fae. So the story takes place, and we meet the female protagonist of this story, Feyre. And she and her family used to be wealthy, but due to some poor business decisions, they have lost their wealth and now essentially live in a hovel on the edge of the woods. And her mother has passed away. She lives with her 2 sisters, Nesta and Elaine, and her dad. And her job essentially has been to take care of the family. And she does this largely by going out and hunting to provide food for them and then sell whatever she can and get money for that. So she's very much like the downtrodden, abused sister who's like keeping this family together. One day while she's out in the woods, she encounters like this massive wolf creature that is about to kill a deer, which she wants the deer for herself and her family. So she kills the wolf and, takes it home. They eat it, takes the skin, sells it, the pelt, I mean. And what she doesn't realize is that the wolf was a fairy in disguise. So a little later on, while they're at home one evening, another beastly fairy shows up and is like, you killed my friend. And because of that, I'm essentially going to take the person who killed the wolf back to the fairy part of Prithian, to the spring court. Yes, I think that's right. And so she's like freaked out, but she's going to protect her family. So Feyre's like, it was me. I killed the wolf. I'm going to sacrifice myself. And he's like, great. You're coming to live with me forever. You'll never see your family again. So they go off and she settles into life in the spring court, which is like this fantastical little place where it's always springtime and it's beautiful. And he lives in like this lovely castle and has all of these servants, etc., etc. While she's there, she meets Lucian, and Lucian is like Tamlin's right-hand man. And as Feyre like settles into her new life, she gets to know Lucian a little bit. And she also notices like everyone in the spring court, both Tamlin and Lucian and like all of the servants like have masks on all the time. Like she can never see their faces. And so she's like, that's weird. So I don't know, time passes and she realizes that there's like a weird like curse happening in the land of the fairies. Like there's weird magic afoot and bad things are happening and there's bad creatures around. And essentially Lucian and really Tamlin spends the majority of his time going off and like fighting monsters, essentially, in the woods. And yeah, there's just like this growing kind of blight that is like encroaching across the fairylands, and no one's entirely sure what's going on. So
no one or Feyre?
Well, Feyre, that's true. So Feyre doesn't know what's going on. Everyone else knows what's going on. And so anyhow, at first Feyre was like really pissed that she has to be here. And she's like, what am I going to do? And I miss my family and who's going to take care of them? But after a while, she starts to settle in. She realizes that she can pursue her passion for painting, and she starts to warm up to Tamlin and Lucian as well.
Ooh.
Things happen. There's a festival that happens, some sort of like magical seasonal festival
I
that
forget what it's called. Damn
I
it.
forget too.
Damn it.
And
It's important.
so she is told by Tamlin, you need to stay inside, lock the doors, do not come out tonight as we're celebrating. Like, I don't know. It's definitely like some sort of, maybe it has to do with spring, like the beginning of
Oh
spring
my
or something. It's
gosh.
definitely related to a
Calamai.
season. What is it called?
Calamai.
Calamai. So
Calamai.
they're having this special ritual, and she's supposed to stay inside. Of course, Feyre is very headstrong, and she's like, F that. I'm going to
The
sneak out and figure out
saddest
what's going on. She goes and she runs into this guy who she later finds
Uh-huh.
out is Rhysand. I'm just going to call him Rhys.
Mm.
She runs
Mm-hmm.
into Rhys, who's like this dark, mysterious stranger. And he essentially saves her from like getting gang raped from a
God.
bunch of other fairies that are also out and about, like, ooh, a human woman. How exciting.
Mm.
So he saves her. Tamlin finds out that she didn't listen and snuck out, and he's upset. I think Lucian is the one who ultimately like takes her back to the house and is like, stay put. Like, bad things will happen if you don't stay put.
Mm-hmm.
Later that night, I think it's that night, Tamlin, she does run into Tamlin. He's come back from or maybe it's early in the morning. He comes
Yeah.
back from the ceremony, ritual, festival, etc. He is very sexually aggressive towards her, and he basically is like, I'm under like a magic spell right now and I can't control myself. It's garbage. Anyhow, so like that happens. And then
Oh.
like I'm trying to remember how to like connect this to the next part of the story, but
Mm-hmm.
essentially things continue to grow worse in the land of the fairies, and ultimately Feyre is sent back home by Tamlin because he's like, it's no longer safe for you to be here. There are evil forces at play, which we don't really know who yet, but there are evil forces at play who are going to harm you as a human if you stick around, because they're coming for me. And if you're here, you're absolutely going to like die. So he sends her back to
So
go ahead,
I
jump
want to
in.
pause real
Yes,
quick
pause.
because we missed some things. The reason why, right, is that so in the middle somewhere though, where before we get to this point, Feyre's trying to get answers.
Yes.
And
Oh,
she goes and finds the cereal that Lucian told her about.
mm-hmm.
And she ensnares the cereal. And supposedly it's like really difficult to
Yes.
capture one.
Mm-hmm.
And she asks it various questions. And one of the most important things that the cereal says to her is to stay with the High Lord. You'll be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so that doesn't necessarily like get listened to, but it's kind of in the back of her mind
Mm-hmm.
throughout the story. It's like, oh, I need to stay with Tamlin. But then the catalyst for her leaving was Rhysand came to the house
Mm-hmm.
at some
Yes.
point and then figured out that the human woman that he met at Calamite
Mm-hmm.
is living with Tamlin. And
Yes.
and Rhysand is Amarantha's right-hand man.
And he's from the Night Court.
And he's from the Night Court.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucian and Tamlin think very poorly of Rhysand
Mm-hmm.
because he's evil or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so they assume that he's going to go back and tell Amarantha about Feyre. So that's
Yes.
why Tamlin's like, you can't stay here. You have to leave.
And we know at that point too, thank you for mentioning that, like Amarantha is like the bad, she's like the Wicked Witch of the West, right? Like she is like the force that has like created a lot of the evil that's happening right now.
Mm.
And she is like really pissed that humans basically got away from the Fae after the battle that happened many, many years ago.
Mhm.
And she wants things to go back to the way they were. And so she's wreaking havoc in Prithian.
Mhm.
So thank you, Kelsey. So now Feyre is like, all right, she's dismissed. She's sent back to the human world. And
Mhm.
when she gets back, she realizes that Tamlin has taken really good care of her family. They're now like super wealthy again and have a great house and servants, and all is well in that world. And what Tamlin did when he took Feyre away, he basically altered their memories So they thought that Feyre was just like away visiting a sick aunt this entire time, when in fact
Mm-hmm.
she'd been living with the fairies. So they're just like, oh my gosh, welcome back. How's the aunt? And she's like, oh, she died, and here I am again. So she's there. She's like, again,
Not well.
adjusting to life back in the human world. Her sister Nesta, however, the spell essentially didn't work on her. At least didn't work well. And she knows that Feyre's been
Mm-hmm.
gone and living with the fairies this entire time.
Yeah.
So Feyre realizes after spending a little bit of time at home that she's like, I feel really bad leaving Tamlin and Lucian to their demise with
Mm-hmm.
Amarantha, and I have to like go back and do something to help. So she's only at home for like a couple chapters, and then she decides that she's going to head back. And Nesta actually supports this decision too, her sister. And so she
Mm-hmm.
heads back to Prithian to see what she can do to save Tamlin and Lucian. So when she gets back to the spring court, like everyone's gone. Like the entire like mansion has been like ransacked and wrecked. It's clear that like, there was some sort of altercation. While she's there, she runs into Alice, who essentially is like the head housekeeper, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tamlin's staff. And Feyre is like, hey, Alice, I really need to go find Tamlin. Can you show me how to get to where they are? Which is this
Mm-hmm.
place called Under the Mountain, if I'm remembering
Mm-hmm.
correctly.
Yep, that's
And
correct.
Alice is really hesitant at first because she's like, you're a human. If you go to Under the Mountain, you're going to die. It's a suicide mission.
Mm-hmm.
But Feyre is insistent. And so Alice shows her this shortcut and takes her to Under the Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where Tamlin is currently being held,
Mm-hmm.
because Tamlin was like and you can explain this part to Kelsey, because I don't want to get it wrong. Like there's
Uh-huh.
some sort of curse that he
Yeah.
was under that was for like, was it 50
About
years?
50 years. Yep.
Yeah.
And the time was
And
up.
the time was up, so he had to like go back. Oh yeah, so essentially to break the curse, he had to find a human woman who essentially hated fairies and get her to fall in love with him to
Yeah.
break the spell. And so
Mm-hmm.
like obviously Feyre would have been like the perfect choice for that, but instead of
Mm-hmm.
like letting her stay and fall in love with him, he like sent her away. So now he's stuck with the evil queen Amarantha and is like under her control.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as Feyre gets to Under the Mountain, she's like immediately arrested and thrown in jail, because of course they catch her. And Amarantha is basically like, hey, I'll let you and Tamlin leave if you can go through 3 trials. And if you
Mm-hmm.
successfully make it through all 3 trials, you can go home. Or you can solve this riddle. One or the other. If you could do one of those 2 things, I'll let you and Tamlin like go free. So over the
Mm-hmm.
course of the next couple of chapters, she goes through a series of trials and tribulations. And
Mm-hmm.
with the help of Rhysand,
Oh,
she
interesting.
gets through most of them, or all of them. What am I saying? And that's when you start to see like, oh, like maybe Rhysand isn't just a bad guy. Like maybe he is like
Mm.
trying to like subvert Amarantha's control and like be the guy on the inside, right? To like get Amarantha out of the way. And so we see like this blossoming partnership. I wouldn't say friendship, but partnership between Rhysand and Feyre, because they
Mm-hmm.
both have common goals. And
Mm-hmm.
in the process of them working together, Rhysand like helps to heal Feyre after a particularly challenging trial.
Mm-hmm.
And in exchange for healing her, he's like, hey, everything comes with a price. If I heal you, then you have to spend like a week with me in the night court, like 1 week out of every
Every
month.
month.
And
Yeah.
she's like, cool, yeah, great, we'll just do it. I'm not going to survive otherwise. So that's important to keep in mind, that she's like bonded herself to him for like a week out of every
Mm-hmm.
month. So yeah, these trials continue. She makes them through, and then finally, I'm trying to move along because this is a really long book, and yeah,
lots
there's a
of
lot of stuff. And I feel like
details.
for a book summary, I don't want to go into every single detail because we'll get to that
Yeah.
later. But essentially, at the end of the book, this is so stupid. He like solves the riddle that Amarantha set for her. And the answer, of course, is love, which was just like, okay, well, anyhow, we'll leave the commentary for later. So the answer is love. And like ultimately, in this final moment of conflict, Feyre actually ends up dying, like full on dying, but the
Mhm.
spell gets broken. And because of that, some of the fairies like put their magic together and bring her back to life. But in
All
order
the
to
High
do that,
Lords
all the High Lords
do
from the
this.
different courts, they bring her
Yeah.
back to life because they're grateful to her because she saved their kingdoms as well, their courts.
Mhm.
And they bring her back to life. But the catch is if they bring her back to life, it's not going to be as a human. She is now a fairy. And yeah, so the book basically wraps up with Tamlin and Feyre leaving to go back to the Spring Court. Rhysand goes off to his court, and all
And so-
seems well-ish, but I would say at this point, Feyre is definitely a haunted individual because she
Mhm.
did end up having to murder some folks as part of the trials,
Yeah.
and she feels really awful about that. The
Yeah.
end.
And I think, yeah, that was, if you hadn't mentioned it, I was going to mention that the last trial was killing 3
Yes.
fairies.
Yes.
And
she kills 2 of them.
she kills 2 of them. And then the last one is Tamlin. And she has to
Mhm.
decide whether or not she's going to stab him in the heart or not. But remembers that his heart is heart of stone. And
Yes.
so she's like, oh, yeah, and stabs him. He doesn't die. And Amarantha was like pissed about that. And that's when
Yeah.
things got crazy. And then she's like, wait, it's love. And then Amarantha's
So
like, I don't fucking
stupid.
care, bitch. And she's going to kill her
Mhm.
anyway.
Yeah. Yep. That's what happened.
But then was it, fuck, it was Rhysand, wasn't it, that killed Amarantha? Oh my God. Now, or was it Tamlin? It wasn't Tamlin, right? Oh my God. Now
I have the book in front of me. Like I can like look up right now. I think it is Rhysand. I mean, you should know this is your world, Kelsey. Don't let the people down.
Okay, Tamlin does kill
It is Tamlin.
Amarantha.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because Rhysand is like incapacitated at that point, I think. He gets like chucked across the room or something, I think.
Yeah, okay. Because that was the other thing about the curse was that Tamlin didn't have all of his powers.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's
so
right.
when the
Curse
curse
lifted.
was broken, he regains
got
his
his full
powers and
fairy
then
powers.
kills
Yeah.
Amarantha.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for the summary. There just are some really important things that we have to touch on.
Okay, but wait, you have to ask me about the positives.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to start asking me your
We're
questions.
getting there.
Okay. That's the next point.
So, yeah, tell us the things and the details that you really did like about this book.
Okay. So there are 2 things. One is I will say that I think that Sarah J. Maas is a skilled writer. And you know me, I know I'm being a dead horse at this point, but I love good writing. It's no surprise to anyone. And I would say pretty immediately, like within the first couple of chapters, I was like, oh, the writing itself immediately drew me into the story. I think the way that she knew how to set a scene and the way that she knows how to like breathe life into a world through her like vivid descriptions, I was instantly like, oh, I'm there with you. Like I'm right there with you. And so I appreciated, for the most part, there were a couple of hiccups, but for the most part, I appreciated the writing in the book. And I thought that, yeah, she's a great writer. The second thing that I liked about the book, which I kind of mentioned in my short response earlier, is that I'm a huge fan of fairy tales. I've definitely made that clear multiple times on this podcast, in all shapes and forms and sizes and lengths. Grew up reading them. I love retellings. I love fractured fairy tales. And so this book is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And I'm a little shocked that literally none of my friends who have read this book and have been trying to get me to read it, Kelsey included, never were like, hey, Amanda, this is just a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. Because honestly, if someone had told me it's just a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, if someone had told me that, I'm like, oh my God, absolutely. I cannot wait to read this book. But like, literally no one said that, and it never came up in conversation. And it wasn't until I started reading reviews of this book in preparation for this episode that I saw some people mention that. But I'm like, that's a huge part of this book, and it's one of the reasons that I liked it, or liked that aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, while I think that a lot of the details are a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, I do not think it's just a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. There are quite a variety of differences.
Yeah, but retellings are allowed to have differences. That's what makes a retelling.
Yeah, but just a retelling, it's not
okay,
just
a reimagining. It is a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast.
You said it. Let's argue. Come on.
Okay.
Okay. Now, so kind of getting into some important parts. What were your thoughts on, so we're going to start with characters. Okay.
Okay.
What were your thoughts on Feyre?
So I want to preface this whole thing by saying this.
Okay.
Because I read this book as a fairy tale and was not really able to, I just couldn't, I couldn't not think of this book as a fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it really shaped the way that I responded to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in some ways I didn't read it as critically as other texts because as a fairy
Mm.
tale, like you're expecting stock characters, you're expecting it to be tropey, you're expecting the plot to be predictable in a certain way, and it was. And so
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I feel like in some ways I had a very surface level reading of this book. Like reading
Mm.
something as a fairy tale, the way in which you engage with it, at least for me, can be very different from the way that I'm engaging with a novel, what regardless of the genre. And
Mm-hmm.
so Feyre was like, okay, yeah, like she's like the down on her luck, like overworked, abused, fairy tale protagonist. She starts off very much as like a Cinderella character, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then morphs into, Belle from Beauty and the Beast. And like
Mm-hmm.
that's all I saw her as. I think if I was going to critically break down Feyre, I would be like, yeah, you are someone who, even though you come across as strong willed, right? Because here you are, like, you're like this huntress and like protector, and you're going to try and go off and save Tamlin. At the
Yeah.
same time, and this reminded me a little bit of Bella in Twilight, she is very much shaped and influenced by the men in her life. And the
Mm.
way that she so quickly falls for her captor, right,
Mm-hmm.
is concerning. But again, if you're reading this as a fairy tale, it's not. It's like, of course, that's what
Right.
happens in a fairy tale. If
Right.
you're reading this as like a contemporary fantasy novel in 2024, you're like, hell no. Like, that is so
Sure.
gross. And like, a lot of their interactions are super problematic. And she's
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, I've been here for a while. And like, oh, he is kind of hot. Like, yeah, let's get it on, even though some of these behaviors are super aggressive and like not okay. So
Yeah.
I did really struggle to come away with these like critical analyses of the characters because they were such two-dimensional fairy tale characters, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of jumping on that, like you said, Feyre's background is she was the worker of the family. She was the provider, the caretaker.
Yeah, she's a breadwinner. Yeah.
The only one with like actual skills that supports the family.
Mm-hmm.
And it would make sense that she would get along with or be in a relationship with someone who is now providing all of those things to her and then also problematic. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
feel like the story made sense in that way.
Yeah, but
Just kind of providing
again,
that.
because and that tracks with like Beauty and the Beast as well, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Bella's the one who's supporting her and her father. And so it's nice to show up to a place where finally like someone else is like taking care of you, that
Right.
you're being provided for, that you kind of can live
Yeah.
this life of luxury. And so like it definitely tracks for sure. And I don't think I can fault Feyre for being like, oh my gosh, okay, I can finally just like take a breather and enjoy some pastimes,
Yeah. And like her painting and all of that
Yeah. And
too.
I
Yeah.
do admire the fact, like, I will say this for Feyre, like, she is a strong woman in certain aspects, right? And I don't want to like
Mm-hmm.
overshadow that or diminish that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she definitely has elements of being kind of, again, we've used this term before, like the badass female fantasy character. There
Mm-hmm.
are definitely
Who's
elements
19
there.
always.
Who's always 19. And you definitely see that towards the end of the book as well when
Mm-hmm.
she's going through these trials, and it's
Right.
insane in the amount of like sheer will and determination and strength she has, especially in the face of great physical pain and injury, is
Mm-hmm.
impressive, right? It's nice to
Yeah.
see a woman kind of holding her own in that way.
Because even at first she was going to reject like Rhysand's offer and then was
Mm-hmm.
like, fuck, like
Mm-hmm.
if I don't take this deal,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm gonna die here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
so
go ahead.
had to make that difficult decision against her own better judgment or her desire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The counterpoint I will say to that though is that most of the decisions she's making are for a man. Like she's doing all of
Totally.
this for Tamlin. She's not doing it for herself or her own agency and independence.
Mm-hmm.
You could maybe make the argument that she's doing it for like all of the fairies, which I don't
Yeah.
think holds a lot of water. But yeah, all of the ways in which she's showing this strength and determination is in
Mm-hmm.
order to get a man, which is like
Mm-hmm.
such a letdown.
Which also to put in the space,
Mm-hmm.
the part of the reason why she ends up so broken at the end of the book is because she's given pretty much all of herself to
Yep.
a man
Yep.
and has been broken for a man. And
Mm-hmm.
that actually is one of the points of the book.
Mm.
And I just cannot wait to actually have like a full conversation about this book and the next
Mm-hmm. Well,
with
because like
you.
she's broken by multiple men in the book. Like her dad, once he lost the money and was injured
Yeah.
by the folks who came after him, he just kind of checked out. And even her sisters
Yeah.
are like, Nesta's so pissed at their dad for just like, well, that sucks. Now
Right.
I'm just gonna sulk in the corner for the rest of my days. And
Mm-hmm.
so like her life and what she's had to do has been the result of like either men not stepping up and like being who they should be in her life, like a father
Mm-hmm.
figure and someone who's caring for her, or like they're guys who are using her in certain ways, like Rhys. Or it's a guy. I mean, honestly, Tamlin is kind of using her as well. I know he like ultimately like loves her, but he's also using her. Um,
Totally.
and so yeah, again, it reminds me of Bella too. It's like you have this young woman whose life is very much shaped by the whims and desires of the men in her orbit.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
just find as a writer, Sarah J. Maas is writing in the 2020s, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
this is like the story that you're still choosing to tell, like this, to quote Beauty and the Beast, this tale as old as time, like I'm a little disappointed that she's not doing more to subvert some of these really problematic tropes that have populated both fairy tales and fantasy for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's really disappointing.
So the other point too that I want to make is that in this book, also, Feyre doesn't have many choices like that she's making for herself. Other people are making choices for her. So, like her dad, right?
Mhm.
He gambled things away and he made that choice for the family where they ultimately ended up broke and poor, right? And living the
Mhm.
way that they did.
Mhm.
And not Rhysand, Tamlin is making this choice of she can't know what's going on and she
Mhm.
can't be helpful to me.
Mhm.
So I'm
Mhm.
not going to let her in. She needs to stay
Mhm.
at the house. Like
Mhm.
I'm safeguarding her. I'm making this choice for her. And so yeah, variety of those things happen throughout the book. And so that's also important to note in
Yeah.
this book.
But I think that, yeah, I think that ties into to what I was just saying, how like her life is shaped by other people's desires and whims and choices and not by
Mhm.
her own,
Mhm.
agency. And like, you don't really, I could be misremembering, but you don't really ever see her making a choice that's like solely for her and for her
Mhm.
own benefit. Maybe some minor ones that are not
Like the
coming to mind.
painting, like
Maybe the
painting.
painting.
Mhm.
But outside of that, pretty much every single choice she makes in the book is for someone else. And again, not to keep tying this back to a book like Twilight, but it's this idea that women are here, in service of, to varying degrees, men. And I didn't like that at all.
Mhm.
And again, if I'm reading this as a fairy tale that's based in those really problematic patriarchal tropes, because fairy tales have been around for like forever, it's like, okay, well, fine, I can like overlook that because this is a fairy tale. But if you're reading
Mhm.
this again as a contemporary fantasy novel, it's like, that is not okay. And that is not the message that you should be sending to readers, especially with the amount of like women and young women who, as you said, are like using this book as like an entry point into reading once again. Like, is
Mhm.
this the kind of message that we want to send? And again, I haven't read the other books, so maybe like she
Yeah.
addresses that and fixes that. I hope so. But just based on this book, I'm like, oh yeah, no, Sarah, no.
I think the thing I wouldn't say that Sarah's writing abilities are around like Feyre is a strong character, but her books are around romance, right? So it does center around her love interest. And
Yeah.
so that is the truth of it. There was
Mm-hmm.
another point I wanted to make though, and I forgot it. What the thing that she does really well, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't get that sense until the following book, is she knows how to organize a series and create like these Easter eggs throughout the
Mm-hmm.
series
Mm-hmm.
leading up to the ultimate reveal of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that about her books. And so that's something I would say is really strong for Sarah J. Maas.
I think it's really interesting though, because, and you kind of just touched on it, like people who love this series and people who love
Mhm.
Sarah J. Maas I have heard countless people who are like, yay, ACOTAR series, yay, Sarah J. Maas,
Yeah.
who like across the board are like, yeah, the first book's not that great. Like they are willing to admit like this is not
Yeah.
it. And yet so many of them chose to continue on. And I find that interesting
Mm-hmm.
because generally if you read a book and you're like, oh, this is like not it, or this is kind of shitty, like my
Mm-hmm.
first impulse isn't like, can't wait to read the next one. People are just like willing to kind of overlook that this is not the best book, best story, best character building, whatever, and are still just like, yes, I wanted to read more, and yes, this is such a great series. And that's really interesting because, again, sorry guys, I keep on talking about Twilight. I apologize, but it reminds me of like a little bit of Twilight where folks are like, yeah, like X, Y, or Z isn't great about this series, and yet I am still a diehard fan. And I'm curious, like for you, if you had
Mm-hmm.
come across ACOTAR, not knowing that it was like this international best-selling book and now franchise, it appears, would
Yeah.
you have read this book and then like, oh yes, I want to read the next one, or would you have been like, nope, one and done? I'm just
Oh, it's
curious.
so funny because actually, how did I hear about ACOTAR? I honestly don't remember,
Mhm.
but I remember loving the first book actually. So I was
Oh,
on the
okay.
different end
Okay.
of it. And I had some whiplash going into book two. And I was like, okay, it makes sense. But, and obviously I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to tell you what happens, but I did enjoy the storytelling. I did
Mm,
enjoy
okay.
Feyre. I did
Mm-hmm.
enjoy her going to those different trials. It reminded me of like, what is it called? Why the Mockingbird comes up, but that's part
The
of
Hunger
the
Games?
yes, thank you. The
Yeah.
Hunger Games, it reminded me of the Hunger Games where there's like trials, right? And
Yeah.
so that portion I really loved about
Yeah. Yeah.
this book too.
Same.
And yeah, and the fact that I didn't know everything, I
Mm-hmm.
actually like that about a book.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think the things that I did like about this book were the elements that did connect it to a traditional fairy tale, our fairy tale tropes, like the three trials at the end. It's such a motif
Mhm.
and fairy tales, right? You know, and the riddle and like the crazy quick reversal of fortune, you know, for Feyre's family, like overnight because of
Uh-huh.
Tamlin's magic. They're now like their wealth has been like those are all such motifs and tropes in the fairy tale world, which
Mhm.
again, as since I was reading it as a fairy tale, I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like I recognize that. I understand its place in this story. I can enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
So as a fairy tale, thoroughly enjoyed it, found it to be super entertaining and actually made me want to read the second one. I know the second one is not like a continuation of the Beauty and the Beast
Mhm.
story or reimagining. So I'm curious to see what my response will be to that book when I read it.
Mhm.
But again, I will say as a reimagining, and honestly, back to my original claim that's a retelling because I remember when I first started this book, you'll remember this
Yeah.
because I was texting you. And it was like the first scene when Feyre like shows up at the spring court and like her
Yeah.
and Lucian and Tamlin are like having lunch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Lucian is Lumiere. And he's like trying to help Tamlin have a normal conversation with a girl, right? And Alice is like Mrs. Potts, right? And it was so obvious. Just like a character for character, plot point for plot point retelling. Like it, at least at that
Yeah.
point in the book. So I think I might stand by that still, you know, and the fact that
I
like
mean, it is.
I mean, it is like, and
Yeah.
even things where, you know, in Beauty and the Beast, like he has the library for Belle, and in this story, he has the painting gallery
Yep.
as a
Yep.
gift. Like it, she did not go out of her way, especially at the beginning of this story, to truly like reimagine things in that regard. It does move further away from it as the book goes along. You're right. But
Yes.
especially at the beginning, I was like, oh no, this is absolutely it. One thing, too, as a quick kind of tangent, there's one thing that I found confusing and a little jarring at points.
Okay.
It didn't happen a ton, but there were like these weird shifts in dialogue. And
Mm.
that made me doubt a little bit Sarah J. Maas's skill as a writer overall. Because there were these
Mhm.
moments where, like, for the most part, the language was a little bit, I don't know, old world formal. And then out of the blue, the characters would say something that made them sound like, you know, 21st century bros. And I remember one
Mm.
line, Lucian, I wrote them down. Like one time he's like, shit, Feyre, I'm not that old. And I'm like, okay, that just sounds like something, again, a 21st century character would say, or like, at some point he was like, I admire your balls, Feyre. I really do. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what my 14-year-old like teenagers say to each other. And it was so jarring because, otherwise we're kind of speaking this more like lofty, dialogue that tracks with this kind of high fantasy world they're inhabiting. And I just found that hilarious and jarring. It was just like these random shifts that seemed anachronistic.
Funny because it sounded like in those moments, it was when they were kind of joking back and forth and just, I don't think Tamlin does that ever.
No, it's mainly like Lucien and Feyre and their conversations. I was like, this is so weird.
But also makes sense for their friendship, right?
But then
the fact that they're getting more comfortable with each other.
Yeah, but a good writer would find ways to have that same tone, right? But within the correct dialogue that has already been established. Like you can accomplish that same end, but using language or phrasing or diction that's like, oh, that tracks with the rest of the story. It's not a main point. It's not a big point.
Yeah,
I just jotted it down and I thought it was like, oh, this is interesting.
Oh, interesting, Amanda.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead. You have more questions.
You have a question?
I have a question. So, and this, I don't know if you'll be able to answer because I have a feeling this might be like one of those Easter egg things that will come up later. I'm pretty confident and I have a sneaking suspicion what the answer might be. So Jurian, right, who was like one of the human, what's the word I'm looking for? Generals. I don't know in the war. He was like one of the leaders in the fight against the fairies. He's the one who killed Amarantha's sister. And they mentioned several times, at least twice for sure, like how Jurian, in addition to like falling in love with this high fae woman and then ultimately killing her, but he has like this human whore on the side. And I'm putting that in quotes because that's what it says in the book. And I want to know who she is. And if you can't tell me, can you tell me if this like comes up again in the later books?
Human whore. I'm trying to remember this. So
it was a small part of the story, so you might not remember, but I was just curious because I'm like, they brought it up a couple of times, and I knew that you had mentioned before that like Sarah J. Maas will like pop things into these stories that will come back later, and I was like, is she a character that is somehow going to like pop up again in some way, or is connected to another character in the story?
Jurian definitely has what's it called?
A reappearance?
Baggage. Yes, and a reappearance.
Okay.
So you can know.
Well, I figured he's gonna come back or in some way because like at the end of the story, like the eye and the bone fragment that like Amarantha kept of his, like in her jewelry or whatever, like it's missing at the end. So I'm like, okay. Like Jurian is definitely going to come back in some way, shape, or form. Like that is for sure. Like,
you definitely get more backstory with Jurian, and he does reappear.
Okay, that was one of my questions. And then my other question too, and then you can keep asking yours was, and I know this is going to tie into the second book because at this point I'm fairly confident that like Rhys and Feyre end up together. But there's some note. There was like at the end of the book, right before Rhys is about to leave, he like sees something in Feyre's face before he disappears. And I'm like, ooh, what was it? Is that something that's also going to come up?
Yes.
Okay.
It definitely will.
Yeah. Because it's obvious her and Tamlin aren't going to end up together. Like that was pretty clear. And I think even just from reading some reviews, I got the sense like that is the case, which is fine because he's stupid. Yeah. Those are my two questions. What were your, I know you have other things you wanted to like.
I'm still like with the characters. So obviously I feel like you don't really have much more to say about Tamlin, but do you want to say anything more about Tamlin?
I mean, again, kind of if Feyre was like, oh, I get the role that you play in this. I understand which stock character you are. So this is hard for me because I don't read romance and I find sex scenes in general just like, ugh. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just too much of a prude, but I wouldn't say I enjoy reading sex scenes. Like, it's not like, oh, yes, I love this smut. Where I know some people do, which is, again, that's totally fine. Like, no shade, like, enjoy it. It's just, for me, it's just not a thing for me. So I didn't enjoy those interactions. And I think I also, because he is like this beast man, I think I jotted this down in my notes somewhere. I'm like, what is this obsession that we as females often have with like the man beast, right? They show up a lot in stories. They show up a lot in fantasy stories. They show up a lot
Yeah.
in fairy tales. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, is this just the patriarchy, kind of doing
Mm.
its work on the female psyche? And it's like, this is the kind of man you want. That is like dark and brooding and mysterious and like kind of violent, but in a way that maybe is socially acceptable. So we're not going to like interrogate it too much. And I
Mm.
think Tamlin, I flip flopped between being like, oh, like you seem like a kind, sensitive, sweet soul, and like, oh, you seem a little rapey at times. And like, it's that
Ugh.
whole thing, and it drives me crazy. And we see this time and time again where it's like, but men can't control their impulses. And so women have to do X, Y, or Z to keep
Mm-hmm.
them from like, and I hate it so much. And
Yeah.
for me, Tamlin fell into that trap several times in this book, and it made
Mm-hmm.
me like him less. And I also didn't like the fact, and this is why I was like, I wrote Claire in all caps, the fact that he sat there, and I know, I guess he didn't have a lot of choice, whatever, that he let this poor innocent girl die this torturous, grisly death in front of him and did nothing. And yes, you could make the argument like, well, he had limited options or none at all or whatever. But I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
I think I like you a little bit less for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was so awful and
Yeah.
distressing, and you did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
yeah, go ahead.
that is one of the biggest criticisms of Tamlin
Oh,
throughout this from the fandom.
okay. Okay.
Like,
All right.
is that what the fuck, Tamlin? You literally did nothing to.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you can bring up Claire, but
Mm-hmm.
also Feyre. Like, he
Yeah.
literally didn't do anything for Feyre. And the
Yeah.
moment that he got her alone for the only time that he got
Oh,
her,
yeah.
he just like
Yep.
smothered her in
Yep.
his kisses, right?
Yep.
Like it
Yep.
was just a sexual act
Yep.
rather than any sort of planning, any
Yep.
sort of like forethought of like, how can I get you out of
Yep.
here? How can I save you?
Yep.
It was just like, I'm just going to kiss you one more time.
Yep.
And it was, yeah, it is gross. And that's part of Tamlin's character and his development.
Yeah.
And I will say there is, because you've already like hinted at it, but like definitely Feyre, she's at a
Mm-hmm.
point, like her breaking point, right?
Yep.
At the end of this book.
Mm-hmm.
And that continues into the second book. And then you see kind of a healing path for her.
Good.
And I really love that about the
Yeah.
next like trajectory and book. But yeah, so I'm excited for
Yeah.
that. But
I think, and I think if she does end up or has more of a relationship with Rhys, like obviously it was smart of Sarah to start to peel back the mask, right?
Mhm.
No pun intended, of Tamlin to show like, yeah, maybe at the beginning we're positioned to think of him as kind of the hero, right? He's the
Mhm.
the quote unquote prince, right? And he's handsome
Takes
and
care of her
strapping and takes care
family.
of her, and takes care of her family. But then by the end of it, like if you've been paying attention, like
Mhm.
your feelings hopefully as a reader have shifted, and you see the ways in which Rhys instead was the one who like did the hard work. He's the one who
Mhm.
actually helped her. He is the one who actually took steps to make sure that she made it through the trials. Like if it wasn't for Rhys, she would not have survived. And like
Right.
you can't say that about Tamlin. He's very much
Nope.
in this passive position. And aside from, yeah, the couple things at the beginning where he like helps her family, like Tamlin doesn't do a whole lot for Feyre. He doesn't. Like if you
Mhm.
kind of put them side by side. And so if
Mhm.
she is going to make that shift and like Tamlin's going to go a different way and Feyre might end up with Rhys, then it's like, okay, that was smart to start laying the foundation for the
Mhm.
undoing of that relationship. Because by the end, I don't know, maybe some people did, but this is where I think it departed a bit from the fairy tale because it doesn't have a happily ever after. Like
Right.
Feyre, as you said, and as is very clear in the book, she is broken, she is distraught, she is not sleeping, she's not happy. And even though they're going back to their little spring court kingdom together, like it's clear
Mhm.
all is not right
Right.
in, this fairy tale world.
Fairies. Feyre's
And
world.
yeah, and I
Mhm.
appreciated that too because you know me, I like things that are a bit darker and twistier and seeing like the sides of characters that are not bright and shiny. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I'm down with that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm. So interesting. So many things to talk about. So I
I
think
know.
like in the next, so those who are not getting the gist of what I'm laying down, we are going to be reading the next book.
Yes. Yeah.
But it'll probably be in like a Patreon type situation
Hmm.
where it's not like you're getting these books every month, just
Hmm.
just these books because we want to do other books and highlight other authors and things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're thinking that it'll be like on a separate, like bonus episodes that you might
Mm-hmm.
get access to
Yeah, and we'll dive
later
more
on.
into these. But wait,
But
before we do that though, because now we're gonna start wrapping things up and go to our literally the best, literally the worst, which will be fun. I want to know what you think, and I know she doesn't have a huge role in this book. And I, again, from what I've heard, the little bit I've heard, I feel like she does have a bigger role later as Nesta,
yeah.
because I loved the arc of Nesta in this book. I know it was small. I know she's not a major character yet. I think she might be. I hope so. But of course, you meet her and you're like, ugh, here's the evil stepsister, right? And I loved, again, as we peel back her layers, there's
Mhm.
an even better character underneath, so like the opposite of what's happening with Tamlin. Like, I love that she's a straight shooter. I love that she's blunt. I love that she has like no pretense. Like, she just gives it to you straight. And I love that she like loves her family so fiercely. And I think what is often interpreted at the beginning of the book as like, I don't know, anger or indifference or whatever is actually
Mhm.
the ways in which she is trying to love and protect the people who are close to her.
Mhm.
And so she was one small character that I was like, oh yeah, I see you, Nesta. I see you.
So it's so funny that you bring that up.
You think about
Again,
Nesta.
in the fandom,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of choose between, do you like Feyre or Nesta more? And Nesta actually has her own book. And
Ooh.
I'm curious, like this is my guess for how
Mm-hmm.
you will enjoy the following books.
Mm-hmm.
The next book isn't going to be for you,
Okay.
even though a lot of things are going to make sense from book one into book two.
Mm-hmm.
It is very much a romance book. And
Mm-hmm.
then the third book, I think you'll like more
Okay.
because it's really like a war book.
Okay.
And
Done with
and
that.
then the fourth book is Nesta's book. And I think
Oh.
you will wait. I think there a novella comes before that. I can't remember
Okay.
actually. And then it's Nesta's book. And so I think you will enjoy Nesta's storyline
Okay.
because it is so messy and it is so human. But at the same time, I think you're not going to enjoy it's definitely a different kind of romance
Okay.
from book two to book five. But
Okay.
I think you will enjoy that one more than the
Okay.
second book.
All right. Well, we shall see
Those
if
are
your
my
predictions are correct. All right.
predictions.
Listen well, audience, and then you can like
Yeah.
see if these predictions are accurate.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
trying to think through the things. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I definitely am not looking forward to the sexy and slash smut. Like,
Yes.
I
There's a
ugh,
lot.
it's I know there's a lot and it is so not for me. And I will probably just like skip through those pages because I'm
Uh,
like, I don't need this.
some of
And
them are actually really important. So I
okay,
don't
well, I
know.
will
Maybe I could describe it to you and
I
let you know the important information.
no,
Not describe the sex, but describe the important information.
please don't describe the sex. No, okay, fine. I'll probably read them then. But definitely I will say that's I think one of the reasons why I've not been interested in like Sarah J. Maas's books is
Yeah.
because like when I obviously don't read romance, but like I just yeah, smut is not for me. And I know so
Hmm.
many people love it and it's such a huge draw for a lot of people. And it's
Yeah.
just not for me. And when it's such a huge part of her writing, I'm just like, yeah, these I'm not gonna want to pick up these books and read them. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
But
But now, since we
but
made this
now
podcast, you're just like, oh my God, I'm getting into them.
which is what this is all about, y'all. We're
Yes.
out here
Yes.
expanding our reading tastes and having fun while we're doing it. So, you
Well,
know.
I was going to say too, just that I'm trying to think through all the things that we should talk about before we get
Mhm.
to the next book, but things like the serial, recent Feyre's like first encounter,
Mhm.
those things like can wait until the next read.
Oh,
But I guess what are your thoughts on you've mentioned it a little bit. What are your thoughts
okay.
on Rhys in general?
Oh, just as like a
And
character?
yeah.
I mean, I think it's like, the very like obvious misunderstood bad guy who actually is a good guy arc, you know? And I'm not mad about it because
Uh,
again, that's one of those things where in like a traditional fairy tale, like the bad guy's the bad guy, end of story. And this one, it's like the bad guy is, oh, wait, maybe he's not. And I liked that.
mm,
And he obviously became more likable as the story went on, which is
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because when I first started reading this
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, ugh, Tamlin, I was like, oh, I really like Lucian. Like Lucian's great. And I
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
want something to happen with him and like Feyre. And then Rhys shows up and I was like, oh, okay. All right. So I liked his arc. Again, I liked the fact that he wasn't just this one-dimensional, again, like he is the bad guy. He has bad intentions. He's like a villain and nothing else. Like it's clear that he has his own trauma. I don't know what it is yet, but he has his
Mm-hmm.
own trauma happening that has shaped him. He is also, I think, driven by a desire to protect and help those he cares about, who I don't know who they are entirely. I think we'll find
Mm-hmm.
out more in the second book, like what exactly is
Maybe.
happening in the night court and like,
Yeah.
why he's made the choices he's made. But he, like Feyre, kind of got dealt a bad hand and had to make a
Mm-hmm.
desperate choice in a desperate situation. He did align himself with Amarantha, but he didn't like let that define him. So he wasn't like, okay, I'm siding with this queen and now I'm helpless and hopeless like Tamlin. He's like, I'm siding with this queen, but now I'm going to use my cunning and my, I don't even know, just ability to like plan and think to see what I can
Yeah.
do in this situation to make it better. And again, I was like, I wanted
Mm-hmm.
Tamlin to do that, and Tamlin didn't. He's just up there sulking on his little throne, like. And
Yeah.
Rhys is like, okay, I'm stuck here, but there's always something I can do.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a choice I can make, and I appreciated that about him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a word I'm looking for that is escaping me. But anyhow, I just appreciate his ability. He's an opportunist for sure, but his ability to see multiple avenues out of a situation or multiple solutions, even if they might not always be the most moral on the surface,
Mm-hmm.
I at least appreciate that he was proactive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so yeah, I really liked Rhys. And again, I'm pretty sure Sarah J. Maas wants us to like him, considering what will
Mm-hmm.
happen next. And I think she did a good job of doing that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, did you understand that his role was basically like he was Amarantha's whore, essentially?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. They made that really clear. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure because
Yeah.
that hadn't like it come up like
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So though, do we do our ratings first or do you
Yes.
do your ultimate
Oh, we do our final recommendations.
yeah,
That's
final
right.
recommendations? Okay.
Yes. Do you want me to go first?
Yes, I want you to go
Oh,
first.
I actually, I haven't thought about this, honestly. I would say, would I recommend
Ooh.
this book? God. So I think there's always a part of me. I am that person, dear listeners, who I think often is automatically positioned against something just because it's popular. Like I'm always like, yeah, I am that person that I think
Mm-hmm.
questions when folks just jump on a bandwagon. I'm like, is this actually worth it? Or are people just jumping on the bandwagon to jump on the bandwagon?
Uh-huh.
So I think a lot of that came up for me with this series and with Sarah J. Maas in particular. I would say if you are an individual who enjoys fairy tales, I think you will enjoy it as a retelling and or reimagining of the story. If you are somebody who enjoys romantasy, I think there are better books for you. And I'm saying this as someone who has heard from other romantasy lovers that this is not a great book.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say if you are like, I love romantasy, this is my jam, maybe find something else to read unless you are willing to commit to reading all of the other books because it sounds like you have to get to those in order to be like, yes. So if
Oh,
you're someone who's
yes.
like, yeah, I don't want to commit to an entire series when the first book is not great, find something else. Read one of her other series. I've heard that her other ones are much better. I can't
Interesting.
confirm that because I don't have firsthand experience. I've just heard this.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
maybe check out some of her other series instead of this one. If
Hmm.
you're a romantasy person. But fairy tale wise, I thought it was, it was a nice retelling of Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah. Which also brings me to another point I wanted to make is
Oh yeah.
that I think that you would like Throne of Glass a little more
Yeah, you've
than
mentioned
this
that. Yeah.
because it isn't heavy romantasy
Okay.
until maybe near the end of the series, but it's
Okay.
really about this Selena Sardouthian being a freaking badass like
Mm,
murderer
right.
essentially. And yeah, I think you would like those
Yeah.
more than this because there's so much smut in the book. upcoming books.
Oh God. Not looking forward to that. This was already
I can't
the
wait.
level of smut in ACOTAR was about all I could manage. If it's more than that, I
Oh,
think
it's
I'm going to
more.
be so distressed.
But then I think the 5th book is where like the most of the smut is with
Oh,
Nesta's
gosh.
story.
Okay. All right. Well,
Okay. All right. Are we gonna
wait,
do
what's your? I guess we already know your final recommendation. I don't think we
Yeah,
have to.
I
Yeah,
totally
yeah. You
recommend this
definitely
book.
recommend it. Okay. Okay.
Duh.
Just I just want to make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's. All right, then let's jump into our literally the best, literally the worst.
Yeah. Are we gonna do 3 or 5?
I have 3. I have 3.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. And then, as always, just a little side note, if this is your first time listening to our Lit It or Quit It episode, I am about to read 1-star reviews from Goodreads for this book, and Kelsey is going to read some 5-star reviews, both for your entertainment and also to, give voice to some other opinions on this podcast. So
I'm sorry, they're so funny. There's so many
they're
good
hilarious.
ones.
But I will also say, as a quick disclaimer, one of mine is a 3-star that my friend Anna sent me. Shout out to Anna. I'm gonna read just because it's very entertaining and does like kind of highlight some of the issues with the book. So
Actually, real shout out to Anna because she always sends me ACOTAR stuff. By the way, she likes ACOTAR and will send me like memes and stuff on my own personal account. And I'll be like, hey,
I love it.
it's so great. Okay. Well, I can start with
Great.
5-star.
Great.
From Regan on Goodreads. 5-star. I'm making all of these very short and sweet. So just FYI.
Got it.
Ooh, so good.
Is that it?
That's it. I just had to. Thank you,
really
Regan.
appreciated like the yodeling that happened right in the middle of your.
Well, there's capitals in the middle. So what else am I supposed to do?
I think you did a great job interpreting that. Well done. Mine are not super short, but okay. So
let's hear it.
This first one is from Amber, and then in parentheses, Books of Amber. And they say, I just don't understand how the author of Heir of Fire could give us this shit fest, because that's what it is. I am honestly disgusted with the depiction of abuse in this book. And yes, I know that A Court of Thorns and Roses is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but that fairy tale is hella old. And if you're going to write a retelling and publish it nowadays, I think some adjustments should be made. Like the abuse aspect should be written properly and not romanticized. Tamlin, the love interest, plays the role of the beast, even though he's a beautiful fey creature who's apparently very charismatic. Charismatic enough to get into Feyre's pants, apparently. I didn't like him to start with because I am so over the look at me, I'm hot and broody and mysterious, so love me thing. And then when he went up to Feyre and told her to stay in her room where he would rape her, I was out. So out. Rape and abuse should not be a cheap plot device. Basically, don't read it.
Fair.
Yeah, I completely agree. 1000%.
All right, another 5-star review, which is totally the opposite of. Oh God, what am I promoting here?
I don't know, Kelsey.
Okay, so from Chan, 5-star rating also on Goodreads. She's just saying, I'm gonna stick with my 2017 rating. I am a girl of simple, slutty tastes.
Wait, is that it?
That's it. I told you. They're gonna be
I feel like so far, like Team 1-star is absolutely winning with these reviews. I think we're like pointing out some really problematic issues with this book. Okay, Mimi, another 1-star review. Here we go. DNF'd at 38% because slow and boring. I don't think this book would have worked for me in any mood. There's just too much that bothered and not enough to entice. Not even the Fae mythology was interesting enough to pull me in, and the meandering writing and the young, feisty protagonist and her long-suffering POV were exhausting. Plus, there's an overwhelming YA-ness to the writing that irked me. Lots of self-evaluating inner monologues, lots of discussion of good versus evil, lots of self-righteousness, lots of descriptions of lavish clothing and decor, lots of ridiculous logic. And to top it off, the beast wasn't a beast, but a beautiful cursed fairy lord, and the heroine an overly self-righteous, self-sacrificing caricature. It's hard for me to believe that this book isn't a parody of YA. I completely lost interest around 15% when the main character Feyre killed a fairy lord in wolf form and wasn't punished because a life for a life made too much sense in this world. Instead, she was offered a chance to live out the rest of her life in leisure in the opulent fairy realm as punishment. That's her punishment for killing a fairy. Rolled my eyes so hard, I sprained a muscle. But I pressed on anyway to no avail. Finally had to give in when it looked like nothing was happening and that Feyre and the Beast were just frolicking through the fairy countryside for a couple hundred pages. Honestly, it's something I didn't mention earlier that I actually didn't like about the book. Yeah, the middle part, a good chunk of it could have been cut out. It like didn't move the plot along, and it really was them just kind of like, look at us in like the spring court and la di da. So I agree with Mimi on that point.
I would definitely disagree just because it's part of the world building. They were encountering different monsters. Lucian and Feyre were getting to know each other. Like there was definitely like
there are things happen in the middle, but there are some parts I think could have been cut out. And I think she put them in there to show like give Tamlin and Feyre some time together. To be like, yeah, like we're sitting in the meadow and reflecting, but I don't know, some of it did feel a little redundant. But anyhow, your turn.
Okay, this is a slightly longer,
okay.
but only just by a little bit, and I have
folks
to say
your side are going to be like, Kelsey, you got to give us more to defend our side. Come on now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, maybe I'll read one more after this. Even I don't know, but it's funny. Okay, Julia on Goodreads. This is my 8th time reading this book, and I realize I have never written a review for it. Illiterate human saves immortal pussy boyfriend from eternal damnation. 10 out of 10 is what they said.
That's the review. That's a 5-star. Okay, okay. Again, apologies in advance, but this again reminds me so much of the Twilight reviews where folks like,
okay.
Yeah, this is not great, but we like it anyway.
Wait. Okay, there was one. Okay, I will read a real one.
Okay. People are going to come for you, Kelsey.
I feel like I thoroughly defended this book.
I think you did, but the reviews are not doing it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
From Jessica, also on Goodreads. Oh my God, you guys, look at my original view. I totally thought Tamlin was bae. I'm dying. Oh, to be young and innocent. 2018 was such a simpler time, but I still loathe Nesta with every fiber of my being. So I guess some things never change. Laugh out loud. This was serving me some major Beauty and the Beast meets Twilight realness.
Okay.
And I had no idea that was something I needed in my life until now. I completely understand the hype around this book, all of the world building, the writing, the pacing, and of course, all the Tamlin brilliance. It is safe to say that I am now a proud owner of a first-class ticket on the Sarah J. Maas bandwagon. The woman is a queen.
Well, I don't feel bad for bringing up Twilight so often because clearly that's like
someone else was thinking it.
Yeah. But I was even thinking too, as you were reading, I was like, oh yeah, even the fact that like Feyre becomes Fae and Bella becomes a vampire. I'm like, yeah, that's another like direct correlation between the two.
Wait, Bella becomes
Bella.
Okay.
Bella.
In Twilight,
Bella becomes a vampire. Yeah.
Not
like,
Belle
from Beauty. Bella
like,
and Beauty. Fun twist. There's another.
That could be a new retelling of Beauty and the Beast.
There's like, it's now a vampire tale. Okay. This is my last one. It is, I think, hilarious. And this is the one that Anna sent me. So this is actually 3 stars, not 1 star, but it's great.
Okay, yes.
This is from Allie L. An illiterate 19-year-old straight up kills a guy and is outraged when there are consequences. Her punishment is living in a mansion with a hot mayor and hanging out with his friend, the nicest guy in the world and the only character I care about in this series. This is a tragic turn of events for Feyre, as it separates her from her life as an indentured servant to her shitty family. Who's going to take care of her deadbeat dad, her personality-proof younger sister, and Nesta, Satan's apprentice? One day, a generically handsome man appears, and all of Book Talk developed a bat fetish overnight. Some stuff happens as Feyre ends up in the Tri-Wizard tournament from hell, where she has to outsmart a worm. Feyre struggles, but eventually triumphs due to severe interference from outside sources. This goes on
AKA
for
Rhys.
5 books. The fan base for this series is the size of a largish army. And if you say something negative about Cassian, they will hunt you down and ruin your life. And honestly, good for them. Like,
Oh, I love
definitely
it.
the best review, I think, of any of the Litrex episodes we've had so far.
I
Thank you so
feel
much,
like,
Anna.
yeah, it is definitely a mid review because it's
It
kind of
is.
going back and
It
forth.
is.
Like,
Yeah. That's
I
why it's
love
3
this.
stars.
And then I also hate it for this, and I love it for this.
Yeah.
It's definitely going back and forth.
It's
Oh,
great.
I
I love
love
their way
that.
with words. Thank you,
I
Allie
remember
L.
you sending this to me, and I was like, you can't say that. You don't even know who Cassian is yet.
I
You're like,
don't, but
"Doesn't
Allie L
matter."
does, and she's the one who wrote it. So oh
Oh,
man,
so
those are
good.
great. All right. We
Well,
did it. We did
I
the thing.
truly hope you all enjoyed this first episode of the ACOTAR.
We enjoyed. I enjoyed it.
Reading, I 100% enjoyed
This
it.
was
It was
fun.
just fun to talk about one of my favorite worlds with you.
Yeah.
And you didn't
Yeah.
absolutely destroy it.
I
So that
didn't, which was
was
surprising because I was like full on ready to go to town on this book. Like, I feel like I was more mean about or like incisive and cutting with Divine Rivals than I was with
totally.
this book. Like, I
Yeah.
was not as, but like, again, it was like the Beauty and the Beast thing. It got me. I was like, oh, that's my weakness. Like,
But also the things that you don't like Sarah J. Maas is like really good at those things,
yeah.
at making sure the plot aligns,
Mhm.
the world
Mhm.
aligns,
Yeah.
and good writing.
Yeah. And the world building, like, unlike Divine Rivals, like the world building was here. Like, I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that she took her time and explained the mythology, explained how the world worked. Like, she did a great job with that. So can't be mad about that. All right. Well, thanks guys so much for being here and listening. Please, 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 please comment on this episode if you're listening
Yes.
on Spotify, or
Let
hop
us
on our
know what you
socials.
think.
I want to talk about this more. Like, I know it's a hot topic for a lot
It
of
is.
people, a lot of readers. So be sure to hop on our socials. As a reminder, that's Instagram at lit_vibes_only_podcast, TikTok
Mhm.
at Lit Vibes Only Podcast. And if you want to watch us get into it on this episode, you can head over to YouTube. Our YouTube channel is at Lit Vibes Only
Yes.
Podcast. And then
Please
last
do.
plug for stickers. You only got 2 weeks left. So if you want
2
one of them,
Fridays from now.
write that comment, write that review, rate us. And yeah, get
We're
your
excited to
sticker.
hear from you.
We're so excited. Thanks for joining us, guys. See you on Monday.
Bye.